Now, delighted to be chatting with Tinryland Senior Football Manager Steve O'Mara ahead of the 2022 Senior Football Championship Final. Tinryland up against Palatine. Who would have thought it at the start of the year? Probably a big target for Tinryland, obviously, Steve. But not many people would have put their money on this particular final pairing. Not that you mind.
No. Brendan Hennessy told me it was 1950 since they last played, was it? I think if you multiply the bookies' odds out, it would have been over 100 to 1 from the start, as the two teams would have got that far and not played each other. So, yeah, it's a rare old opportunity, I suppose.
Yeah, it's been a real novel season, I think. Definitely one that neutrals are intrigued by, with, I suppose, Aero going out in the quarter-final stages and Rathvilly obviously going out in the semi-finals. Like that's amazing at the start of the year. Again, people wouldn't have really predicted that as such. But from your point of view, so are you into year two now or year three with Tinryland?
Year two, yeah.
Year two. But it's only year 1.5 really, because you didn't really get...
1.25 really, I'd say, with the junior final last year on the 31st of July. We really only got 4 or 5 weeks out of it properly last year, I suppose. So, yeah, I'd say 1.25 is more like it, Kev.
Yeah, so this is the first real full year that you had a proper pre-season and everything, that you can go and prepare properly and have a right good cut at it.
Yeah, absolutely. We spent the winter in the gym and we were probably back training by all accounts earlier than most teams. I suppose we're going from Dublin. When you're coaching in Dublin, you're back on the 2nd of January, 3rd of January normally. So I thought I was coming back late in the middle of February, and I was being told, yeah, most teams wouldn't be back yet. But look, we'd a lot to do, a lot of technical work I wanted to do in the winter, a lot of tactical work. We suppose, look, again, an introduction for me last year was, the interpretation of the rules in different parts of the country are different, and definitely the rules around sort of grappling and handling of the body are a lot looser down here than they would be, say, in Dublin or Galway. And that, I spent the season probably getting used to that and realised, yeah, there's a winter or two of gym work needed here to catch up, because we were just probably getting battered around the place a little bit by one or two of the more seasoned teams last year,
Mm-hmm. When you come into a club like you have with Tinryland, and obviously your CV and record speaks for itself, you obviously go and cut your cloth to suit your measure. At what point did you realise that the current style of Tinryland are playing is right for Tinryland, and what sort of experimenting do you do until you find that recipe?
Yeah, well, look, we've done a good bit. We were probably playing a more expansive game earlier in the league, and we were just actually managed all right during the league, but shipped a good few goals in friendlies we played after the league. Now, I know the 12-week break isn't ideal, but I don't mind it. You get to play the teams at the standard you want to play on the days you want to play, and I think we played 9, 10, 11 friendlies in that period, but suppose we're getting close to championship and just things weren't as tight as we wanted. But look, there's probably not as much a style as people think as well. Like, a lot of it depends on what's thrown at you and who you're playing and what way they're set up as well. Like, there have been probably, I know the game yesterday with Rangers probably wasn't pretty on the eye, certainly not in the first half, but there's days for playing certain kinds of games, and there's parts of games for playing certain kinds of games. And we did open up in the second half, and that was more or less the plan. And especially when the wind, which was stronger than it probably seemed in the stand, the way the wind was, that game sort of bar really bad shooting. Like, we kicked 7 balls wide, short or off the post yesterday in the first half. We'd actually more shots in the first half than Rangers had, having played into the wind. So as bad as the scoreline looked at half time, I don't think it was that brutal a first half performance. We got shots off in 6 of our first 7 phases, which is extremely high. Now, as I say, it was effective for us on the day, bar the bad shooting until the second half. But not all the games have been like that either. That first half.
Would you have been disappointed with how long it took you to get shots off? Could there have been a bit more urgency in the first half? Like, I know you're always saying as a coach, don't rush it, lads, don't rush it. But were they a little bit cautious in trying to create the opportunity early on, do you think?
Again, what I'd say there is, now, the 10 minutes, the really bad period we had yesterday was from 20 minutes to 30 minutes. But I'm looking at analytics in front of me here. I'll just confirm now, if you bear with me. I think the expected score on 20 minutes, we were quite dominant at that stage, to my mind. But we were shooting really poorly. The expected score at that stage was 3-1 to us, But again, it's the laws of probability. We've shot quite well this year. Which last year we were shooting well below expected score in nearly every game. We put a lot of work into shooting. Eddie Dowling, the assistant coach, has done a lot of technical work with the boys, and the ball skills have improved hugely. And just now there was a really dirty wind there in the first half, and I didn't appreciate it. I was in watching the first game for 5 minutes to get a feel of the wind, and I thought, slight moderate wind down in the field there, like that was a ferocious wind. I don't think people in the stands really realise you'd have to have been on the field to have got it. So ultimately, no, we had a bad 10 minutes. Again, it was hard winning kickouts there yesterday. It was a brutal wind, and Rangers started turning them over between 20 and 30 minutes. But like up to 27 minutes, 1 point to nil down, we'd had 6 shots, we'd put them all short or wide. When you look at the expected score, it wasn't that brutal the first half, to be honest with you. So
you obviously expected Rangers to get back in numbers then?
Look, I think in this day and age, really everyone gets back in numbers, to be honest with you. Now, in fairness, what I'd say about Rangers, they're the first team we played this year who didn't hold the sweeper on any kickouts, went man and man up the field, and we did have the intention to give them their dues. I think they're really well coached and really well schooled, and look, technically hurling tackling is more difficult. I always found that hurling tacklers tend to be better football tacklers than most footballers. Footballers only say that there were times there we knew they'd go man and man on the kick out, and we wanted to, if we got hands on ball on the kick out to the half back line or midfield, we wanted to go at them, but once or twice, like big runners like Conor O'Toole and Paddy Regan tried to go by them and they were just pushed back, so you have to give Rangers their dues there. Like they did go man and man maybe to the halfway line, and they made a couple of turnovers, and they pushed us back a few times, and then you go into that kind of safer play to build it up. But it wasn't sort of turning your backs to the ball and getting back to the 45 from Rangers to give them their dues. Not that I have any issue with that if it's the practical thing to do at a certain time. But I think in modern football, like everyone's getting men behind the ball. I think Rangers probably more than themselves. The 2 or 3 lads left up the whole time, which I think on the average of things probably is less defensive than most teams in modern football, being honest.
Yeah. Another thing that I kind of found yesterday, and I don't know how much knowledge you would have had of it beforehand or not, and again, it's something we remarked upon in the podcast, and it was nothing to do with poor Owen Fenton the goal from Munster Rangers. But in general, as a rule, right, if you're coming into a game like that, and you see someone that's played maybe a couple of minutes, which I think he did the last day as a blood sub, so effectively no football, right? It's such an important position. Was it a thought process to maybe go after? Because I looked at it and I think, it didn't seem like he really properly went after that. And if you look back on the goal, I don't think there was a full squeeze put on. There was a bit of a split. And are you trying to force that out to a corner back? Or, I've got a couple of questions, I suppose, there. It's a couple of statements that are supposed to be questions, but you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, listen, again, I won't go too much in depth on that, but what I would say now, listen, I got wind that their keeper was injured. Somebody who was linked down in Borrows told us on Saturday morning, and my initial thought was, I've got 4 pieces of intel this year, and 3 of them were absolute plants that weren't accurate, so I'm not paying too much attention to that. But then make someone go down to me the stats and there's a different lad in there and the goal's warming up. Look, what I'd say is that goal wasn't, huge pressure for a lad. It wasn't entirely accidental now from our side either. If you look at Conor Brennan's movement, it wasn't entirely accidental. Other side, listen, the analytics we had going into that game was our lowest expected score in any game was 12 points. Our highest expected score concession was 8 points. Rangers have scored 7 goals in 2 games. My feel was we weren't going to lose that game unless we shot brutally, the whole script went upside down, or they got 2 goals or more. So playing into that win in the first half, we did sit the sweeper. And you wouldn't always, but we did. Second half, I suppose, look, if you look back, we did give up the first one. The second one, sort of a halfway house, but from then on, and so maybe inspired by the fact that obviously if a keeper gives one away, they're probably feeling the heat. We did, I think, turn over the next 2 or 3 in a row were forced long. And that's probably what they brought back in the regular keeper just to bang them long for the last 15 minutes,
Yeah, that's what I thought you went after. But I suppose then if you force them into that situation, you may not have time to get back into your defensive shell. And we've seen Rangers this year, as you mentioned, the goals they've scored. That's probably the biggest conundrum any coach will have before a game anyway, is whether you go do that or not, isn't it?
Yeah, well, again, I'll tell you straight up, mine would be purely based on analytics. What are the opposition scoring off their short kickouts? What are their opposition scoring on the turnover? What are we conceding off opposition short kickouts? What are we scoring off the turnover? And it's basically a mathematical equation. And then I suppose you'd inverse that against the expected score that you would see for the respective teams coming into the game. And it's literally a risk reward evaluation. Is it worth going after them or not? And against some teams it is, and against some teams it isn't. And in some periods of some games it is, and in some periods of some games it isn't.
Mm. What do you say for people out there that have the old school mentality of analytics are a load of shit? And I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but just say last year that probably would have been thrown at you a little bit when you have the stats there in front of you to back things up, and you have the stats there to illustrate why you lost as well. But people will turn around and say, oh, this now and all this, that and the other. Sure, Jesus, if you don't kick the ball over the bar. And it's prehistoric line of thinking. But it is obviously very frustrating as well when people do say stuff like that, because you're trying to get them to understand maybe where you're coming from. And the facts don't lie, do they?
I don't try to get too many people to understand too much, Kev, to be honest. As Sun Tzu said, if your enemy is making mistakes, don't educate them.
Yeah. Listen,
I'm half joking. Listen, I wrote an article, I did a bit of work, not dissimilar to yourself, in Dublin a few years back. I wrote an article about football and 2 rule changes that would change the game overnight for the better. I appreciate some of that style of football isn't pretty to watch, for a neutral. Listen, I love games like that, even as a neutral. I remember watching Fermanagh and Monaghan in 2018, and I had to turn it off 15 minutes left. It was 8-6, everybody was giving out, and I was loving it. I was disgusted I had to go for the last 15 minutes. I appreciate it's not 90% of people's cup of tea, and I do think, and I'd probably be shooting myself in the toe as a coach. If I was given carte blanche to the rules of Gaelic football, I would ban the back pass to the goalkeeper, and I would bring in a basketball rule that every physical foul is free from 45 metres in front of the goal. I think football will be revolutionised overnight. You wouldn't need to bring in mad rules trying to encourage kicking, because there'd be more value for a cornerback to kick the ball long than have to actually go by his man, as opposed to turn around and give it to the keeper. But as a hurling coach I had when I was a young adult, says I don't make the rules, I just work in my favour as best as I can.
Yeah, and that's all you can do, I suppose. Looking ahead to this Sunday and looking at the opposition, with, I suppose, the line of thinking that you do commit a lot forward when you win the ball, is getting the balance between the numbers going forward and mind in the house one of the biggest factors in this, because out of all the teams I would say in the championship this year, Pal have that raw pace that they can get the ball from back to front pretty quickly. I'm sure that's something that's on your mind.
Yeah, listen, I haven't given a huge amount of thought to Pal yet. I won't lie to you. I'll probably start having a look this evening. I went in and watched the game on Saturday, obviously, but it was more sort of to free the mind. It was more entertain myself and took the stress away from myself on Saturday night. With the first couple of hours I enjoyed all weekend. But no, listen, Pal have serious pace, and they're a different proposition from anybody else, I think, in the championship this year. And I did say, and a number of people around Carlow will verify, when I watched the first games of the weekend, I said, if I didn't know anything about Carlow football, I would say Pal are the team to beat. I thought they were flying. Now, I know Rangers were missing a huge amount of players that day, but even taking them into account, I just thought they were absolutely flying fit. Their style was just serious pace off the shoulder, really smart players. They're in serious condition. There's huge work done in there, you can see it. So listen, yeah, obviously that's a factor. As I say, we'll try and get our hands on a video or two, and we'll start going at it tonight and have a bit maybe for tomorrow and training, and we'll go through the whole shebang on Friday night then with the lads,
Another big headache this week. Does Broderick start?
Well, look, as I say,
you're not going to tell me anyway, but
I'll give you the official line there. We'll assess who it is and isn't injured tonight, and what the state of play is. And
this is called the Left Wing Back podcast for a reason. It's left wing in nature. But yeah, look, I'm not expecting you to answer it, obviously, Steve. But it is one of those catch-22s, isn't it?
It's obviously a consideration now. He's been injured all year. Listen, Paul's had a huge amount of injuries. It's nearly a miracle that he's still playing. And look, he played a bit of soccer over the winter, but it's a lot lighter on the ankles and the body playing soccer. It's a lot. Gaelic football's all twisted and turning, so a lot of the injuries, a lot of injuries that Paul has, they're difficult, especially on the heavy ground or on the hard ground. So even a few days rain, which I gather was coming, mightn't do any harm either. To be all soft. But look, we have to look at, we weigh it up. As I say, we have to see one or two lads got hits yesterday. We'll see who's where as they analyse Pal, see how we see the game going and what we think we'll need at different points. Obviously, look, assuming the body holds up over the week, I'm not giving away state secrets. I get a feature at some stage. Look, we'll see. It'd be great if he can start, and we'll see how it goes later in the week.
The pleasing thing from that particular point of view is when you're looking at this from the get-go, and Paul's obviously come back into the fold a little bit later than everyone else, and now obviously has a good few months under the belt since the soccer season ended, but didn't obviously come back and walk in for various reasons. I know he's had his injuries too, but the fact that you can go and spring him and stay loyal to the lads that have, I suppose, been there since maybe January or that's got to be pleasing, and it would be one of the first things thrown at you if things weren't going right. And no doubt, if he doesn't start on Sunday and Tinryland don't get over the line, it'll probably be one of the first things thrown at you as well. And then if you did start him and you didn't lose or you didn't win, it'll also be thrown at you. So, moral of the story, fuck what people say, basically. to be kind of,
everything is thrown at you anyway if you lose. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
things will be found to throw at you if you lose by some people anyway. But no, look, as one of the beauties probably of Tinryland is, I know probably haven't had massive success with underage over the last whatever amount of years. Under minor championship ones 7 years ago, I think it was 7 or 8 years ago. But there is a lot of decent footballers there. Maybe not like Aero where you could have 10, 12, 15 lads are good enough for the county, but there is a big, like, you look at the junior team on its day, like 6 or 7 of those boys could be playing senior, maybe aren't for one reason or another. So we did have the supply and demand that we could back the boys who've been training, and we put in a serious professional shift this year, and 7, 8 lads coming from Dublin, and we're running separate Dublin sessions during the year. And look, you have to be loyal to the boys. Look, as long as they're performing, obviously to a certain standard, you have to be loyal. But there has been a base of probably 17, 18 lads who trained to inter-county standards this year, and ultimately, and missed virtually nothing, or if they've missed it, being completely accountable. So, we've been loyal to those boys as long as they're performing to a certain standard. 1 or 2 probably just unfortunately haven't necessarily started off to get off all the games from those. Now, listen, there's other boys came in. A few boys came back in May, but I knew they weren't coming back till May, and that's fine. And as I know, just important to point out, Paul didn't finish the soccer season either. And he did. It was injuries kept him out in the league. He played the Aero group game, and that was it. But look, no, it's great that lads there, like Barry Power there. I heard, was it yourself said, Jason, that's the longest I played junior C against Barry Power.
That's a fact.
Yeah, and listen, Barry was playing junior A all his life. He's 27. He made his senior debut in championship, coming on against Palatine. 15 minutes left. Then he started against Air Og the following week and he won. Barry's missed one training session all year. He's in serious shape. He's playing to the process. I can put him in Shane Redmond in training and change that saunter and buy him. So that's probably the kind of example, kind of lad who hasn't played all the championship games, but he's played some, and he started 2 out of 4. He's featured in all 4. So probably a good few boys in that category that have trained well and they've performed well. So they're in the team. It is very hard then, even if it's a Paul Broderick, to just come back in and push one of those boys out,
Mm-hmm. You haven't got Dan Lakes done on Pal. What's the expected score after 20 minutes or half time, or do you know yet?
1-1 maybe.
Good stuff. Listen, Steve,
I'll take 1-1 after 20 minutes, Kevin.
Yeah, good man. You'll take 2-1 after 60, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Or 65, whatever it is. Steve, you've been very good with your time. Really enjoyed chatting to you, and the best luck to yourself and all the lads. All right.